One of the things that I find most fascinating about language learning is the idea that someone who speaks multiple languages might take on different personality traits depending on which language they're speaking. Now, of course, learning a new language will not change you or your personality entirely, but the way that we use language does have a very real impact on the way that we make decisions and interact with the world around us. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense because when you learn a new language, you're going to be interacting with a new group of people and a new culture, and so it's not unreasonable to think that you'll probably pick up some of the habits and behavior patterns that you see used in that culture or with those people. The other thing is memories. And if you think about your native language, you have an entire lifetime worth of experience and memories and connections that are based around that language. And the difference between that and a language that you learn, say, later in life, is that with the new language that you learn as an adult, the memories and experiences that you have in that language are limited to the time period in which you were able to use that language, meaning that your personality, in a way, is very representative of who you were at that time, because those are the experiences and the memories and, of course, the people that you know during that period that you have to draw from for your life experience in that language. Now, this has very fascinating implications, and I think that it's important to think about the way that we use language, whether we're talking about foreign languages or even our own native tongue, because ultimately the language that we use and the words that we choose have an impact on our thoughts, and our thoughts have an impact on our decisions. And therefore, language is really a central component in determining how we interact with the world around us. Now, from personal experience, I can say that I do have slight differences in my personality, the way that I act and the way that I speak in different languages. And obviously, I'm not a totally different person. I'm still me, the essence of my personality and whatever that is. There's something that remains constant, but there are slight differences, and it's very interesting to note, not only maybe as an outsider looking at me, but also the way that I feel and the way that I think in a new language. So for example, in French, this is the first foreign language that I really learned to speak to a decent level. And to me, the French language evokes a kind of exploratory, very open side of myself, because this was, the first foreign language that I was learning. I was visiting a lot of new places, learning a lot of new things, and so I have this sort of openness and sort of a freedom that I may not have necessarily in my native language, which is English. And so, for example, when I'm speaking French, I sometimes find that I am more willing to talk openly about, say, controversial opinions that I hold, or talk about taboo subjects. And I think that the reason for that is that in my native language, I have a bunch of habits built up over years and years of experience that perhaps keep me from opening my mouth in some of those instances, where I might think, okay, maybe this person has a different opinion about this, and they're not going to like it if you express this thing, so keep your mouth shut. Whereas in French, I don't feel held back in a way by all of my life experience, and so I just tend to freely express what I think now, which may be different than how I felt about certain things 10 years ago. So I find that to be very interesting. I also find that in Italian, I have a also very specific sort of mood that goes along with that. And I'm actually in Italy right now, and so it's kind of cool to re-experience a lot of those emotions and those thoughts and everything. I find that in Italian, most of my memories are really positive, because when I was speaking in Italy, I was um, tending to be eating a lot of good food, drinking good wine, seeing a lot of beautiful places, joking around with friends. And so I tend to feel very happy when I'm speaking Italian, because those are the experiences that I've had in that language. Now, aside from memories and experiences, There's also the people that you interact with in a particular language that have an effect on how you might behave in that language. And it makes sense that, of course, when you're learning a language, you're usually trying to assimilate or understand a certain group of people. And so you're going to want to act in a way that creates some sort of harmony between you and those people. In other words, you want to fit in with this new tribe. And that may require acting or speaking in a different way than you would have to in order to fit in with your native tribe, let's say. Relationships tend to start in one language and stay in that language. On occasion, I have experienced a shift in languages between friends or something, where either I learn a language or my friend learns English to a higher level, and so we might change the languages that we use together. But most of the time that stays the same. And what's kind of interesting is that if you do experience one of those shifting relationships where you change language, which again is rare, it's a kind of bizarre phenomenon, because not only because you're using a new language, but because your first language with that person is tied to everything you know about that person. You have the entire relationship with them and all the memories are in one language, and then if you suddenly switch to a new language, it can almost be like getting to know a new person, which is kind of a bizarre phenomenon, and it doesn't always work, which is why the relationships tend to stay in one language. But it can work. It just depends on the people, of course. I also have a handful of relationships in which I speak multiple languages. And these tend to be very interesting relationships, because if you share, say, 2 or 3 languages in common with somebody, and you can sort of freely express yourself in any of these languages, it opens up a new way to interact in which you can freely morph between these languages. I don't recommend mixing them up all at the same time, but you might change languages slowly over time depending on the mood and the situation around you, and that tends to be very interesting. So, in conclusion, I find this concept of different personalities and the different pathways in thinking that languages can open up, I find this all to be super fascinating, and I think it's something that we perhaps don't think about often enough. And I think that the impact of this goes far beyond what I've been talking about on an individual scale, but also a cultural level. And if you think about a language like Japanese, for example, that has all of these various levels of politeness and rank sort of built into the language as one example of something we could look at, that has a very real and concrete impact on the way that people interact with each other in that culture. And obviously the culture is also affecting the language. And so it's sort of this cycle that everything affects everything else, but it's very interesting to note that language is often at the center of that. For example, there are a number of Japanese companies that have chosen to use English as their sort of official work language in order to remove all of those boundaries and the rankings and all of that stuff that are present in the Japanese language. And so the idea being that if you can bypass all of that, you can work in a more egalitarian manner in the workplace. And so in the end, I think that learning a new language is one of the most powerful experiences a person can have, not only because of the obvious benefits of you get to speak that language and you get to interact with new people, but because when you learn a new language, you also learn a new way to think. And because language affects our thoughts, and thoughts affect our decisions and our behavior, if you want to change your behavior, often you can begin by taking a look at your word choice. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope that gives you something new to think about this week. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.